Welcome back to Papa Z's Bees. Today we're going to talk about taking care of our bees, and that includes watering the bees. The bees need water to survive. Bees need water to survive. They not only consume it, but they also use it inside the hive to help keep the hive cool. They use it through evaporation or transevaporation, which is similar to what we used to use back in the 50s for evaporative air conditioning before we had refrigerated air conditioning. Bees will get water wherever they can. They'll get it from places that you provide. They'll get it from your neighbor's swimming pool and other places that you may not want them to get. So it's best to provide bees with water. Here are some examples of ways to give your bees some water. A big trough like this will give them a lot of room, and a lot of bees can come up and land on and produce or retrieve water and take it back to the hive. Typically, you see things like this, these little planter plates with little rocks in it and water in it. And these are great because it gives the bees a location to land on without drowning. But the only problem is they dry up too quick. Well, another option might be to use a chicken waterer. Those work pretty well, but the bees, at least in my experience, the bees tended not to use them that much. So there may not be the best. Plus, they also will dry up a little bit quicker because of the evaporation that's coming from the water coming out of the hive. As I've already said, bees need water to survive. I want something that can deliver water for several days without running a tap constantly. I couldn't find anything that fit that bill, so what do? Let's build something. Here's a picture of what we're going to build, or at least one of the versions of what we're going to build. It's pretty free form. You can do what you want to, but I'll give you some of the basic steps to do that. First, we'll start with the materials needed. We need a 4 to 5 foot 1x8 piece of just standard lumber. Don't use treated lumber. You'll need a large clear plastic container to hold the water. It needs to have a lid that'll cut down on the evaporation. You can use a 4 to 8 gallon, depending on what you want to do. We need a beverage dispenser replacement spigot, and I'll put a link down in the video below that will show you where you can get that from Amazon. You also need a small plastic container, 2 to 3 quarts, something like that, as a terminal reservoir that will be at the bottom of the planter, as you looked at the picture we saw before. You also need miscellaneous screws to attach the water plank to the shelf, rocks to go in the reservoir to keep the bees from drowning so they can land on those. And optional, you build some kind of a shelf or use something you already have, and we'll explain that later. Here's the task list for the trench board, which is probably the most complex piece of this, and it's not complex at all. First thing you do is you want to go outside and locate the shelf where you plan to set your plastic water container in. Take measurements of the bottom of that shelf or where the container is going to go, and down to the ground or down to another shelf if you're going to do that like I do in one of mine. Take that measurement, and basically you want a kind of a 45-degree angle from where the shelf would be down to your reservoir, your small container, and measure that length. So cut that 1x8 to that length. Then you're going to mark the board. We have a video here in a minute to do that. You're going to use a router to gouge the trench along the edge, and then drill starter holes in the top of the board to attach the shelf. Okay, we'll break this process down in 2 different steps. The trench board, which is the board that the water will run down, and then kind of putting everything else and assembling it together. So here's a little video to show how I build the trench board. Okay, here we go making the bee waterer. You take a 1x8, if you can find it, or whatever width you want, but I usually like the 1x8. And then I mark a line down the very center of it. Doesn't have to be exact. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create lines down this thing at a 45-degree angle, and not go all the way through, just go about an inch away through. And then go here past this all the way to about an inch from the other side. And again, these don't have to be exact, because what you're going to do once you get these lines marked, you're going to take a router and actually do the work. So here's what we want to do: is we want to find out, this spot about where I want it to start from here, and then take it back across. So you go back and forth all the way down, and then you've got your lines marked, making sure that you want your water to come down through here. And I usually make a large opening right here so the water will kind of gather at the top, and then at the bottom it'll just be an area about like this. In fact, here's one right here that's similar to it. You see, once I've routed it, and I would router it probably with a wider router bit than I used here. But then, like I said, I've got the larger opening here at the top for the kind of a pooling effect, and then down here at the bottom where it'll drop down. And I'll show you when I get the videos how the things are working when the ones I've got set up. But basically, you drop this down into a container, plastic container with rocks in it. And the water, what you do is you let water drip, and I'll show you that process, and also give you some ideas of where I got the components. A little spigot gadget that will drip water down into here. The water will go back and forth down and then collect in the bottom, but it goes slow enough that a lot of it's going to evaporate. And what the bees will do is they'll come get inside of these grooves and get the water. Now again, I would make this was a prototype here that I used, and had I do it over again, I would make it wider here. And in fact, I'm going to take some of the ones I've got and make them wider. This by the way, is pre-treated lumber. Do not use pre-treated lumber. After I did this for the prototype just to see if it would work, I did some research, and there are the chemicals and stuff they use to treat the wood that could harm the bees. So you just use regular untreated wood, and you're going to let it'll turn brown, which is fine. And then and again, make a wider gap here, because the bees do get in this wide of a gap. The two that I have out in the yard working now, the bees land here and they'll kind of crawl down inside sometimes, but it'd be better if it was wider and maybe not so deep, maybe half the deep. And this is probably about this is about a ½ inch deep, so make it a ¼ inch deep, and then use a wider bit for the ones you're going to make, and the ones I subsequently make will do that. And that again lets that water go down here, and you can leave it on and drip all day long. And then when it collects in the bottom, so the bees will either get the water from here or get water down in from the collection booth. And so it takes a while for them to get used to it as well. So don't get frustrated if they don't immediately start looking for the water, because it takes them a while. But the sooner you can get these out there when it's hot, the better. Because once bees find a source of water, they'll continue to look and use that source. Okay, now we have the board built for the water to go down. Let's figure out how to put it all together. First thing we do, we'll take the spigot that we ordered and measure the entrance of it. At least that's where the water comes in from the container and will go out to the board. Take that measurement and drill a hole inside the container as low to the bottom as you possibly can, as close to the center as you possibly can. Then insert the spigot. There's 2 silicone washers and then a nut and a washer, a stainless steel washer that will go on the outside. So use one of the silicone washers on the spigot side, and then feed that through the hole you just drilled, and put the other silicone washer, the metal washer, and tighten it up as tight as you can. Don't over tighten it, but tighten it where you won't get any leak. Now set this container on the shelf that you're going to use, letting the spigot hang over the edge just a little bit. Place a small container just below the large container where the board will come to rest. I'll put a brick in it. We'll talk about that later. We'll adjust it as well. Attach the trench board to your shelf with the screws, however you want it, whatever your shelf is, with the bottom edge resting inside that small container. And again, I used a brick to set that on. Drill a small hole at about the height that you want the water to be in the reservoir container, the small container, just a little above the brick, because you want that water to flow out so that the bees won't drown as they land on that. Then I use other rocks. I use lava rocks inside the small container to kind of give them more area to land on, and the lava rock tends to kind of suck up the water a little bit, and it gives them the ability to get closer to the water. Then add a few inches of water at this point in the large container. This is for adjusting. Turn on the spigot and make sure that the water is dripping down into the strip. Now be careful if it's windy. Kind of take that into consideration as you place it. So set your large container at the spot where it will drip down into the trench board and follow the path on down into the small container or the reservoir. Adjust the large container to make sure it fits just right, and then fill the container with water. Studies have said that bees like water with a little bit of minerals in it. So if you can find pink Himalayan rock salt, that works really well to put in the bottom. Okay, the next part of what you need to do for the watering device is to get a clear plastic container, whatever size you want to use, depending on how much water, how often you want to fill your water. And I use clear because I want to be able to see the water level pretty quickly and easily. So what you do is you take that and drill a hole in the side, and I'll put a link to the spigot over here. So you drill a hole in this, and the spigot has a silicone washer, and you put the spigot in there, and then you fill it up with water. And then I've got a brick in there to kind of give it a little bit extra weight. But then you can kind of be creative about how you set it up as far as the holder. I've got this braced up against this planter, and then so you have the water level in here, you have the spigot on, and you have your board mounted down here, and then you just turn this on to whatever level that you want. And I usually keep it at a kind of a medium drip, and you kind of have to adjust it and play with it. And then as you see, it'll scroll back and forth down the back and forth, and then the major part will come down here at the bottom, the runoff. And then I keep rocks down in here, and then the bees can land on that. They'll either get up in these little crevices, or they'll land on the rocks and drink that way. So this way you can keep it running as long as you want to, and you just fill it up the way with the drip. It usually about every 2 or 3 days you fill it up. That's a whole lot better than leaving something running constantly, or having to let something dry up. Like these are ones that we've used in the past, and the problem with them is they dry up shortly after you fill them. These are really nice because the bees can land on this and not drown, but the problem is the water dries up. So this is not a good solution, at least in my mind. Okay. So here we are with the finished board. You can see the water dripping down in the board is kind of making it, it's absorbing it. Eventually, hopefully, we'll get some moss in there, and that will further help the bees use it. Here's an example of the water dripping at that about the level I like to keep it, and then again it will go back and forth and give the bees the opportunity to get into it. Now here's one of the other board, and you can see the bees actually up on the board getting some of the water. Now this was earlier, like in April, so they weren't using a lot of water. There was been a lot of rain, but I wanted to get this out there. But you can see her proboscis or tongue getting down into the water that's being dripped in there, and she'll eventually take that back. Here's another bee. You can see her, pardon the focus, but you can see her as well and you can see her abdomen expanding as she brings the water in, and they really seem to like it. As it's gotten hotter, there's been more and more usage of it, and we hope that this will keep them from visiting our neighbors. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to add them to the bottom here. We appreciate your watching. We appreciate your support. I hope this helps you as it's helped us. Thanks a lot.